it's me again. Tonight we're going to cover chapter 14 of the book of Judges. So here we go. Now as the child grew up, Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah with the daughters of the Philistines. Now Zorah is right at the base of the mountains, and Timnah is at the western end of the valley. It's just a few miles down from Zorah, entering into the mountains. Now this is a valley that was occupied by the Philistines. The people of Dan pretty much hugged the hillsides, while the plains were pretty much controlled by the Philistines. Samson went down to the valley to Timnah, a Philistine city. He saw one of the daughters of the Philistines, and he came home and told his father and his mother, "I have seen a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines, and I want you to get her for me as my wife." Now in those days, marriages were made by arrangement. The parents of the bride and groom would get together and they'd haggle over a dowry. And once the amount of that dowry was determined, the groom's father would pay that dowry to the bride's father. And the son would then have the privilege of marrying the girl. Now dowry was their answer to their weak divorce laws, which basically gave women no rights whatsoever. I mean, a woman could not divorce her husband under any circumstances, but a husband could pretty well divorce his wife under any circumstances. If he didn't like her, if he wasn't satisfied with her, if she didn't fix his morning eggs to his liking, he could just write her off and write it out on a piece of paper and say, "I divorce you," hand it over to her, and she had to leave. She had no rights at all. Now, there were in those days a lot of men who had absolutely no integrity whatsoever. We call them lousy guys. And they would take advantage of this law. This was a custom of the dowry. It was developed to protect the woman. The idea or the concept behind it was that it was alimony. It was prepaid alimony. The purpose of it was that dad would make these arrangements. You pay me so much money, I'll put it out, invest it, save it, try to make it into more money. And then if the wife was put out by a writ of divorcement or for any reason at all, then the father of the bride would basically have this dowry money to provide for the girl. So she'd have something to keep her going the rest of her life, wouldn't just be thrown out on the street or try to depend on somebody else to take care of her. That was the purpose of the dowry. So if the husband actually divorced the wife, whether it was for a silly reason or not, she would just come home and the dowry would be used to support her. And this was so she was no burden to her family. The father's duty was to keep that dowry intact, both it and the investments that he made to try to make it more, so that she would just always have something to fall back on. So Samson came home and said, "Hey Dad, I saw this cute little girl down there in Timnah, a daughter of the Philistines. Go down and make the arrangements. I want to marry this girl." His father and his mother asked him if there weren't enough cute girls in Israel, maybe some of his nieces that he could marry. And they asked him why he had to fall in love with one of those uncircumcised Philistine daughters. Samson basically told his father to stop arguing with him and get him what he wanted. The girl pleased him. Now this is the first time, but it's not the last time that we will see Samson falling in love with a Philistine girl. And each time that he did that, it led him into some pretty heavy trouble. Now there are a lot of romantics on Facebook. And I read on there all the time how these romantics say that you can't help who you fall in love with. One of the favorite things that they say is your heart wants what your heart wants. Now I say you can. It's an error to think that you can't help who you fall in love with. And this story is a good story to demonstrate just that fact. I mean, you see, Samson fell in love with a girl in Timnah, when actually he had no business being in Timnah. I mean, had he never gone there, he would never have fallen in love with a girl from Timnah. You see, his first mistake was going into the camp of the enemy. His first mistake led to a second, which was falling in love with a girl. There are places that where we go as children of God, and we should never go there. If we go to these places, trouble will almost always come our way. We could avoid so many problems if we just simply stay out of the camp of the enemy. I mean, the best way to avoid problems is to stay away from problem areas. In Samson's case, just don't go to Timnah. Stay away from the camp of the enemy. He went to Timnah, things compounded, and he fell in love with a girl in Timnah. Now, so often God takes our mistakes and turns them around for his purposes. I really love the way our God deals with us. He turns the tables. He'll take bad stuff and turn it into good stuff just to bless us. If you think about it, Joseph's brothers sold him to the slave traders, and they were going to Egypt. Later, when Joseph faced his brothers, he told them, he said, "Hey guys, don't trouble yourself for what you did. I know you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good and turned it around." It's so gracious that God will, many times, take those things that we do wrong and turn them around to use them for his purposes. He even causes the wrath of man to praise him. And so the parents of Samson did not know that the Lord was seeking an occasion against the Philistines for that time. They had dominion over Israel. Now, I pointed it out before, but here we see the angel of the Lord said that Samson was to begin the deliverance from the Philistines. You note that he never really said he was going to end it. He just said he was going to begin it. So there was no promise here that he would deliver them completely. Then Samson went down, and his father and his mother, to Timnah. And as they came to the vineyards of Timnah, behold, the young lion roared against Samson, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore that lion as you would have torn a little goat. And he had nothing in his hands, nor knife, no sword, or whatever, and he didn't tell his father or his mother what he had done. Now this was to Samson no great feat. I mean, he just tossed it over the vineyard and the bushes and went his way. Didn't tell his parents or anything. If I'd torn a lion apart with my bare hands, I'd be in a permanent chest out position telling everybody that I met what I'd done. But not this guy. It was nothing to him. Now my son Kyler has some of Samson's characteristic traits. He's very meek and humble about the things that he's able to accomplish. Kyler could probably bench press Montana, so it's nothing for him to work out with 400 pounds on the bench press. If I could do that, everyone in Branson would be aware of it. But for Kai, it's just not worth mentioning it. He's really humble about those things. So he went down and talked with the woman, and he was very much in love with this girl. Now after a time, he returned about the time of the wedding to take her as his bride, and he decided to go in and take a look at the carcass of the lion that he had killed. And behold, there was a swarm of bees, and there was honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took the honey in his hands, and he went on the path eating it, and he came to his father and mother and gave it to them, and they did eat it. But he didn't tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Now, why is this so important? You see, Samson is supposed to be a Nazirite. And one of the rules for a Nazirite is that you cannot touch a dead carcass. Even if it were his own parents, he would not be able to touch a dead body. Now here he's taken honey out of the dead carcass of the lion. Samson must have been quite a guy to just reach in this carcass and get a handful of honey. The bees would terrify me. I'd be running like a crazy man. He was licking it off his fingers, sharing it with his parents, letting them take a few licks. He's really a tight-mouthed type of a man. He didn't tell them about it, didn't tell them about killing the lion in the first place, and now he makes no mention of where he obtained the honey. In fact, Samson must have been extremely confident. Perhaps it was just that quiet confidence that we admire in so many people today. Most guys, had they been attacked by a lion along a certain road, would never take their parents along that same road. They'd be afraid that another possible attack by another lion might happen and the parents could be lost. But Samson didn't seem to have any concern about that whatsoever. I think he was really confident that if another lion came along, or even if the whole pride came after him, that he was strong enough and be able to take care of it and protect his parents. Quite a confident character. So his father went down to the woman, and Samson made there a feast. The young men would have these huge wedding feasts lasting 7 days. And it came to pass that when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now these young men were hired to spend the week with the groom. They were to be his companions during his celebration and to help him prepare for the wedding. This is similar to what our bachelor parties are today, only this lasted a lot longer. Samson's parents were evidently of means. They had some financial ability in order to hire that many young men to attend to Samson all week long. So Samson said unto these 30 men, I'm going to put forth a riddle unto you. If you can declare it me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 shirts and 30 changes of garments. But if you cannot declare to me the riddle, then you have to give me 30 shirts and 30 changes of garments. They said to him, You're on, man. What's your riddle? And so he said to them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And for 3 days they tried to figure this thing out. And it came to pass that on the 7th day they said to Samson's wife, Entice your husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, or else we're going to burn you and your father's house with fire. Now these shirts, which he actually bet were really just undershirts. They were worn next to the body, and the 30 changes of garments were the outer robes. This was a pretty healthy bet. So these guys that were hired to keep Samson company during this week can't figure this riddle out. So they threaten the bride, and if she doesn't entice Samson for the answer, they threaten to burn her father's house and burn her with it. It's not really a nice choice for the groomsmen. And Samson's wife wept before him and said, You hate me, you don't love me. You put forth a riddle to these fellows, and you haven't told me what it is. And he said, Hey, I haven't even told my parents, woman. Now she was probably trying to figure this thing out for most of the week. Now she has even more reason to find the answer. She really pushed him for the answer. And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her. Now, you can be sure that she probably nagged him all week long until he gave in. And so she told the riddle to the children of the Philistines, and the men of the city said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you'd have never found out. It's really interesting that he would use this kind of language to speak about his wife. What he said was, to say the least, a pretty unkind thing to say. Plowing my heifer. That was a strange use of words and a bit telling on what was going through his mind. Samson was really upset, and he was fully aware that that she was the one that had told the answer to these guys. Who else could it have been? Trust went right out the window at that point in time, and that was before they were even married. So the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, one of the coastal cities, and there he got hold of 30 Philistines, who he killed, took their shirts and their garments. Now Samson's response to being cheated in this way caused his anger to flare. So he went down to the coastal city of Ashkelon, and he killed 30 Philistines. He stripped them of all of their clothing, and he gave the clothing to these Philistines to pay off his bet. This was also a bit of the in-your-face concept, because he came right back and paid off his bet to these guys who had basically figured out his riddle by cheating. He was still extremely angry even after that. He just went home without even saying anything to his wife. And in retaliation, her father actually gave her to the best man. I think from that point, Samson became even angrier after this insult. Well, that concludes chapter 14. We're going through a lot of these relatively quickly because they're really short chapters, and most of them just set up the stuff that's coming in the next chapter. But I think you can see here that in Samson's case, the bad things that happen certainly can be turned to good things by God, as long as we have faith and trust in Him and allow Him to prepare and walk our paths for us. So that's the end of chapter 14. Hope you're enjoying it and getting a lot out of this. Share these videos with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to these videos so that you'll get notices of new ones that come out. So until we get into chapter 15, which will be very quickly, this is Don Stephens. These are just my thoughts on chapter 14 of the book of Judges. God bless you.